Hello and welcome. Today we're going to make a card similar to this. This is featuring card stamps and dies from Concord and 9th and Honeybee. They just both released these, and I love both releases. Probably bought way more than I should. But anyway, so I thought I'd get right to work on using them. So let's make this card today. The first thing we're going to need is a panel, and this is cut by 5 1/4 by 4. And inside my MISTI, I already put the turnabout stamp from Concord and 9th. And if you've never used one of these, they're fairly easy to use, especially this one because it's meant for the images to overlap. Some of the ones in the past, they haven't wanted the images to overlap, so you kind of end up, and when it does, it looks a little weird. But in this case, they're meant to, so this one's especially easy to use. So if you haven't tried one and you've been kind of anxious about it, this is a good one to start with. I put a little bit of adhesive here, and I'm going to take my panel and put it into the center of this. This is just used as a guide so we can turn this around. As long as this corner is in the corner of the MISTI, it should be fine. What I did was I went through my collection of stamp pads and I picked out some inks that I thought would be fun to do this with. And I'm going to slide this over a little bit. Hopefully you can see. Take all these pieces out. What I'm doing here, I know it's a little tough. But the leaf stamp is on the door, and I'm going to take and first ink this all up with yellow. And the yellow I'm using is Daffodil Delight from Stampin' Up. You can set this aside. And then what I'm going to do is take a brown ink. This is also from Stampin' Up. And this time I'm not going to ink it up. I'm just going to tap in a couple places, kissing the stamp pad to the stamp just a little bit. Close this up, and then I'm going to stamp this down on my paper. And what this is going to do is going to give us a two-tone stamped leaf. So there we go. So see how we got this together, and it might look like a hot mess right now, but when we get them all done, it will come together. So now I'm going to clean my stamp off because I'm going to switch colors. And I'm using a chamois. I know this is kind of a little late to the game, but boy, does that make life easy. Alright, so then I'm going to take my next color, Pumpkin Pie. All these are Stampin' Up inks. Most of my ink pads are Stampin' Up. And then I'm going to kiss this with Really Rust, which is a darker, like a reddish orange. Won't be as dramatic as the yellow and the brown, but that's okay. I don't need them all to be dramatic. And if I didn't say it before, I rotated every time I stamp. There we go. I'm going to rotate this so that the pattern keeps turning. Okay, and clean this up again. So I even noticed here, look, this leaf didn't stamp perfectly. I'm not too worried about it. It will look fine when we're all done. So now I'm going to take Really Rust. Ink them up. And then I'm going to take my brown again and do the kissing technique. And it's nice and random. And you really can't see it on the stamp. You don't get to see what you're doing so much until you stamp it down. Then you can really see the colors. Okay. We want one more turn here. Okay, for my last turn, I think what I'm going to do is use some yellow and orange. You can use any combination of colors you want. I've made a few of these cards. I really like this card. So I've made a few of these, and each time I do something a little different. So let's do Pumpkin Pie. So I inked it up in Daffodil Delight, and now I'm kissing it with Pumpkin Pie. And let's stamp the last rotation. Let's see what we get. Perfect. So here we can pull this off, and we have our completed background image. For our next step, I took a background stamp. This is by Impression Obsessions. I think it's called Splatter. It's just a bunch of dots. I use this a lot to break up white space. So we have a lot of white in here, and I want to just tone that down a little bit. So what I'm going to do is ink this up in the yellow. And it doesn't matter if it's super even. That's one thing that's really cool about this, is that it doesn't matter if everything's perfect here. And I find this easier to do when I just stand up. But I'm just going to take and roll this down. And I really like this mount. But it just puts a bunch of those little splatter dots in here, and it helps just tone down that white a little bit. So that's all that does. It's not necessary. If you skip that step, no big deal. Alright, so this part is done, so let's set that aside. And then what I did was I used the die cuts. Now this one's from Concord and 9th. I really love this leaf, so I used the big part of the leaf to cut out of craft cardstock this guy. Then I used the Because die from Honeybee, and it's a 3-layer die. I really like this. It was a little bit of a splurge, but it has 3 different layers to it. So I have a chocolate, craft, and a white layer. And I noticed my white has a little bit of a smudge on here, but I think it's going to get covered up as a fingerprint when I glue this together. So I'm not too worried here that'll get hidden. So let me start gluing all this together. Okay, so I have these all glued together. I love the way that looks, so it was worth it. What I'm going to do, this is not a stamp platform. It's not magnetic. It's pretty much just a fancy clear block on a hinge. But what I'm going to do is kind of layer or assemble this card the way I want it to look. And I like that leaf turned a little bit. So there we go, and then what I'm going to do is use this to stamp the Just. So this Just comes from another Honeybee set. They do have one that comes with the Because, but because I already own this set, it's called Cheerful Sentiments, I didn't feel I needed both. So your choice on what you prefer in your crafting stash, but I didn't need both. So there we go. So now we have the Just lined up, and pick this up with the door. So I had to clean my stamp in order to get it to stick. And now I'm going to ink it up in the Rich Cocoa and go ahead and stamp that. And I might stamp it a couple times because I really want this to be a dark brown. There we go. Alright, so, and then the last thing I want to do, on my original card, I didn't sponge around this leaf. I'm sorry if you can hear that. My little helper is helping in the background here. Up here. Can you hang on a second, sweetie? What I want to do is sponge around this leaf. Okay, for my last step, I'm going to take some dimensional dots, dimensional adhesive, and apply this to the back of the Because. And there you go. Here are the 2 cards next to each other. I really actually like the additional sponging on this, the top one, the one we just did, versus the one where I left it off. But I hope you enjoyed this. This is a real quick card. I really enjoyed these releases, so if you haven't checked them out, you might want to. Thanks for watching, and I'd love to hear what you think. See you next time.